Delivery boys of Reddit, what is the weirdest delivery you've ever done? Story 1. I was delivering a pizza, and after I knocked on the door, I heard a distant voice shouting, "Coming!" So I patiently waited. A minute later, the voice got louder and closer with a plea of, "I'm almost there. Just wait a little longer." This went on for a few minutes as the voice got closer and closer until the person finally reached the door and opened it. Instead of the expected sight of a person at eye level, I was greeted by a smiling individual on the floor who had no legs and had dragged themselves across the house to answer the door. Touched by their determination, I offered to put the pizza inside for them in the kitchen, and they were incredibly thankful. Story 2. I once delivered 5 pizzas to this guy. When I rang his doorbell, I had to do it several times before he eventually showed up. He didn't say anything to me, he just motioned for me to come in real quick. I know that we aren't supposed to enter people's houses, but I figured I could handle myself if something happened. As soon as I got inside, I noticed the house was filled with strange objects. Right by the entrance was a full suit of armor, and creepy Halloween music was playing in the background. Suddenly, the biggest dog I'd ever seen approached me and fell at my feet, pushing me to the ground. I was sitting on the floor next to the suit of armor, petting the giant dog, waiting for the man to pay me. He ended up giving me a $40 tip. Story 3. I was making a delivery to a neighborhood that was a bit shady, so I was not expecting much in terms of a tip. When I arrived at the house, the lady told me that she didn't have the money, but her husband would be there in 20 minutes with some cash. I decided to wait since it was the last delivery of the night. To my surprise, when she opened up her garage door, there was a pool table, fridge, and television inside. She even offered me a beer, and we ended up playing pool until her husband arrived and gave me the money, along with an extra $20 tip. It was one of the best nights I ever had while working that job. Story 4. I know of a kid who had a serious drug addiction problem. He was so desperate for a fix that he took drastic measures to get his hands on some money. One day, he ordered a pizza to be delivered to his house. When the doorbell rang, he put on a ski mask and snuck out his back door. He then proceeded to rob the unsuspecting delivery driver right in front of his own house. He then went back around the house and opened the front door from the inside, pretending to be shocked at the scene of the robbery. Story 5. I had a delivery to drop off that required a signature. After knocking on the door with no response, I went to my car to write a notice slip. Just then, I noticed a woman waving me up and pointing to the back of the house. I walked back, but the woman had already disappeared. I decided to knock on the back sliding door, and a rather rotund man of 60 years or so, wearing nothing but a tiny t-shirt, answered. As his dogs barked, he spun around and shouted at them. His shirt came undone, and his private parts were exposed. I asked him to sign for the package, which he did, and I quickly made my way back to my car, feeling thoroughly embarrassed and uncomfortable. Story 6. I delivered pizzas while in college and encountered a situation where one of our delivery drivers was robbed while in a certain neighborhood. After we informed our customers that we could no longer deliver to that area, around 10 people called, demanding pizza. To our surprise, they had information about who had committed the robbery and even had the delivery bag still in their house. The police went to the residence and arrested the culprits. After that, we began delivering to the neighborhood once again. Story 7. I was working as a delivery person for an Asian restaurant, and I was sent down a sketchy and bumpy road in the back of my small town near a collection of trailers. When I arrived at the door, I was met with a startling sight. A 50 to 60-year-old woman standing completely naked and 2 equally aged men sitting on the couch with their privates exposed. I quickly took the woman's signature and beat a hasty retreat, but she yelled out of the window for me to come inside with them. I shouted back an empathetic no as I sprinted back to my car, with the woman shouting a slew of curses in my wake. Story 8. I worked for Waiter, a company that provides delivery services for partnered restaurants. On my last delivery of the night, I knocked on the door and a peculiar, pungent aroma wafted out. When the door opened, a man with a gigantic bong in his hand greeted me. He was clearly out of his mind. After a few minutes of explaining who I was and why I was there, he was surprisingly friendly and offered to share his food and marijuana with me because I'd been so kind to come all that way. Story 9. I was a pizza delivery boy in my senior year of high school, and Super Bowl Sunday was one of my busiest shifts. I was delivering to one of the homes when the occupants invited me inside to join them in watching the game. I stayed for a full quarter before heading back to work, not worrying too much about the possibility of getting fired due to the fact that I was leaving for college soon enough. Surprisingly, when my boss asked what had happened, I told him the truth and he kept me around. 15 years later, I'm still friendly with my old boss who still works at the same pizza place, and I visit with my family from time to time. Story 10. I was delivering pizzas to a hotel one day when a man answered the door wearing nothing but boxers and a beanie. I gave him his change, and just as I was about to turn away, I heard a voice from around the corner say, "If he's cute, let him keep the rest." The man at the door smiled and handed me back the change. I wasn't sure what to do, so I just quickly said goodbye and left. Story 11. I was delivering pizza one night in a dodgy neighborhood when I saw a man waving me down from a gated apartment complex. I assumed he was a customer who wanted to meet me outside because the complex was tricky to navigate. Little did I know I was about to make a huge mistake. He clambered into the car and reeked of alcohol and cigarettes. I nervously asked him if the pizza was his, hoping to get rid of him quickly. To my surprise, he replied by saying he just wanted a ride. I was petrified, expecting a weapon or threats to follow. I frantically explained that I was working, and if I wasn't, I would have been more than happy to help him out. I kept saying that I was going to get fired if I didn't finish my shift. After what felt like an eternity, he eventually stumbled out of the car and went on his way. Needless to say, it was a pretty scary experience, and I learned my lesson. Always double check before letting strangers into your car, no matter how drunk they may seem. Story 12. I delivered a couple of pizzas to this elderly couple who had friends over. When I arrived, they invited me in to set the pizza on the table, which was something I wasn't expecting. As we made small talk, I noticed a large purple object on the TV, back when all TVs were CRT. Upon further inspection, I realized it was a dildo. As I looked around the room, I noticed there were dildos everywhere, on the counters, bookshelves, and the coffee table. There must have been at least a dozen spread around the townhouse. Despite the awkwardness of the situation, they were a nice and friendly group that didn't address the dildos, and they even tipped me well. It was an experience I'll never forget. Story 13. We had to deliver beer to a bar, and the delivery went smoothly with no issues or delays. However, the girl signing for the delivery was in tears and desperately trying to hide her sobs. It was quite a situation trying to get the delivery information from someone who was crying. In fact, her tears even ended up smudging the invoice. Story 14. I was delivering a mattress when I arrived at a brand new apartment. Introducing myself, I asked, "Oh, you're just moving in?" The man replied in a bitter tone, "Divorce. Yay me." As I set up the bed, the man came in the room and said, "So, if you wouldn't mind getting out of here as soon as possible, that would be great, because I have someone coming over." Intrigued, I assumed it was someone to talk to about the divorce. And just then, I heard the door open and a woman's voice talking to him. A few minutes later, when I went to have him sign for the bed, they were both trying on leather outfits. Not thinking, I asked, "Oh, do you ride Harleys?" They glanced at each other and he replied, "No, she's just an old hand." With that, I had him sign and quickly left. Story 15. It was the middle of the night and I was delivering for Domino's. When I knocked on the door, I was met with an unexpected surprise. A smoking hot woman answered the door wearing a tantalizing unicorn outfit and immediately began to jiggle her hips in my direction. Meanwhile, a chubby man in the background was capturing the moment on his phone. She then asked if she could place the tip in my pocket, and I shyly agreed. She went ahead and slid the money into my pocket with a surprising amount of force. Afterward, I simply thanked her and continued on my way.